Hello, everyone. I would just like to make one quick point about the the just finished negotiation between the Abiy Ahmed regime and the OLA, the Oromo Liberation Army. And as most of you will have read on the news, the negotiation ended yesterday after 10 days of wrangling in Tanzania, and it ended without any breakthrough. Actually, a more correct way of putting it would be that the whole thing collapsed, and and it was the second round of negotiation, because they had the first one about, I think, 3 4 months ago in Zanzibar, in Tanzania. Again, I don't know why they keep choosing Tanzania. First time didn't work. You would think they would choose another place, but maybe that's for another time. Yesterday, the OLA, the Oromo Liberation Army, issued a statement essentially saying that the reason there couldn't be any breakthrough is because the Ethiopian regime was intransigent, that the Ethiopian regime wasn't ready to listen to one of the main demands of the OLM, according to the statement they issued, and actually according to many sources, even before the talks totally collapsed, was that the OLA wanted the formation of an all-inclusive transitional government in Oromia. So that was one of the main demands. There were a number of other demands which I think the Ethiopian regime might have sort of compromised on, but one of the main demands that the Abiy regime found unpalatable to accept is the request for a transitional government in Oromia, for an all-inclusive, so a transitional government that would include all the political parties in Oromia. And because, again, the reasoning from the OLA side is that the last election was not legitimate, and therefore the current government in Oromia is not legitimate. That is essentially the position of the OLM. And of course, on the other hand, the Abiy Ahmed regime's belief is that the last election was legitimate, and therefore that there is no grounds for formation of transitional government. And so that is from the OLA side in terms of why the talks collapsed. And from the Abiy's side, it's actually quite difficult to understand what exactly the Ethiopian regime's reasons are, because they issued a long statement in which they said a lot of things without actually saying anything tangible. So you can't really read the statement and say, all right, this is the reason why the Abiy Ahmed regime couldn't accept some of the demands of the OLA. But generally, the point that they seem to want to make, again, without quite making it, because they don't quite know how to state their points exactly, not least because they don't quite have strong positions, is that the OLM made impossible or unrealistic or unreasonable or unconstitutional demands. That seems to be the position of the Abiy Ahmed regime, but the statement doesn't quite explain or describe what exactly the OLM demanded that they found they couldn't accept. So that is essentially what happened from the statements. But again, from reliable sources, I had been hearing that there was no chance for any breakthrough, because, again, the Ethiopian regime wasn't in a position to engage the OLA in good faith. And the OLA was making very, very clearly thought out demands, one of which was what I just told you, the the demand for a transitional government in Oromia, which is a perfectly reasonable demand. But of course, the Abiy Ahmed regime wasn't going to accede or succumb to that. So it was always going to, the negotiation was always going to come to an end without any agreement, and that is exactly what happened. So when I read the news yesterday, nothing came as a surprise to me, but a lot of people from, again, judging by reactions on social media, on the news, it looks like people were taken by surprise. And I think one of the reasons why people had expected that there would be an agreement is because there was an agreement between the TPLF and the Abiy Ahmed regime. And I think that gave people the mistaken impression that the same thing would happen this time as well. And that tells you that people don't quite understand why the TPLF and the Abiy Ahmed regime reached at an agreement in Pretoria in last year, November of last year. It wasn't, and this is a very important point, and it sort of, it shows you the difference in context between then and now. The reason the TPLF and the Abiy Ahmed regime arrived or reached at an agreement was because the TPLF was put in a position where it has to sign off whatever document was put in front of it because of the siege that was imposed on Tigray then, because people had been dying from hunger, and to refuse to sign an agreement then would have meant that many more people would have died, and the TPLF would have been blamed for the death. So that was the reason why the TPLF made a lot of concessions and signed what a lot of people have described as a surrender agreement. It wasn't because they engaged in negotiation in good faith, and they make compromises and concessions, and they found middle ground, and at the end everybody was happy and they signed. That wasn't what happened. The Abiy Ahmed regime and his representatives in Pretoria didn't move even an inch to accommodate some of the demands that the TPLF representatives were making. And the TPLF representatives didn't actually make any strong demands because of the position that they were in. All they asked for was that there should be everything should be done according to the constitution. That's all they demanded. And that was already, for the Abiy Ahmed regime, that was too much to ask. Because again, Abiy knew that he had leverage on Tigray because he had imposed a siege, and the international community was all right with the siege. So that is exactly what happened, because the weaponization of hunger was accepted by the American government, by the EU, and by the other entities, by the African Union. No surprise, because the African Union doesn't have any principle or any humanitarian concerns. So the TPLF was put in an impossible position, which meant that they had to sign whatever document was put in front of them, because it's easy to imagine how they would have been blamed if they hadn't signed the agreement, and if hundreds of thousands of people in Tigray died as a result. So that was the context within which the agreement, if we could call it that, was signed. It wasn't the normal way that two warring parties reach at an agreement, where they negotiate, where their respect for principles, for humanitarian laws, and international community is trying to push all parties to respect certain lines and all that. That wasn't what happened. The TPLF was literally a gun was put to their head, and they were told, either you sign this document or you people are going to die, and you're going to carry the can for that. So that was the context. And I think many people have forgotten that that was what happened. Which is why they had expected that the same thing would happen now in Tanzania between the OLA and the Abiy Ahmed regime. They thought that they would, because again, the facilitators, the American government, the AU, and the other entities were the same entities that were the facilitators during the Pretoria Agreement. People thought that they would use the same mechanisms and procedures and tactic and trick and whatever else was needed in Pretoria, but they couldn't do that now, because the OLM is not in the position that the TPLF was. The OLA could reject pressure from the US, pressure from the EU, and still be fine, because Oromia is not under siege, and the OLM generally as an armed group doesn't have any shortage of supply in terms of weaponry, because it has access to Kenya, it has access to Somalia, it controls a lot of Oromia, and a lot of people who are supposedly with the Abiy government in Oromia have connections with them, so they don't have any problem. They could sustain the armed struggle in a way that the TPLF couldn't have. So that meant that the OLA was in a position to say that we are not going to compromise on certain pointers. And one of, as it turned out, they make it clear on the statement, the OLA wasn't ready to compromise on the demand that there should be a transitional government, an all-inclusive transitional government. And there was no way that the Abiy regime was going to accept that, because again, anybody who knows Abiy Ahmed personally as a human being and the way he operates would know that in his understanding, in his dictionary, compromise or making concessions for the sake of peace or for the sake of the betterment of the country is a sign of weakness. So he wasn't going to accept any compromise. The OLA actually uses an interesting word in the statement. They said that the whole purpose of the negotiation from Abiy Ahmed's point of view was the cooptation of the OLA. So he wants them to be integrated into his regime, and everything remains intact. So that was what Abiy wanted to happen. He wanted them to accept some positions in Oromia, but without any change to the regime or to the structure. So that is exactly what cooptation is, and that is what he asked them. But the OLA was in a comfortable position to call out Abiy's bluffs, and that is the reason why the talks collapsed, and they were always going to collapse. And I think anyone who has been following Ethiopia and who understands how Abiy Ahmed works wouldn't have been taken by surprise yesterday when they heard that the negotiation collapsed. So that is the point that I wanted to make, because I find it very, very bizarre that some people had expected that the outcome would be anything other than what it turned out to be. I think if there are people in the United States government or in the European Union or in the African, well, actually, out of self-respect, I shouldn't even mention the African Union. If there are people, and I think the Norwegian government was also involved in this, if they really want to end the war in Oromia, they have to tell Abiy Ahmed exactly what the OLA demanded, because the OLA is making a very, very reasonable demand that there should be a transitional government, and that is a very, very fair demand, because the last election in Oromia was a complete sham. No opposition party participated in the election, and that is the textbook definition of an election that was conducted to give Abiy Ahmed a semblance of legitimacy. That was the whole purpose of it, because there was no competition in Oromia, because all either senior political leaders were arrested, and those who were not arrested didn't want to take part in an election to give Abiy Ahmed legitimacy, and so he won 100%, of course, because he was alone in the race. And so how to end the war in Oromia is very, very very easy. You just listen to them OLA, and you push Abiy Ahmed, you use your leverage to make Abiy Ahmed to accept, however painful it is for him, however much it bruises his ego and it will, that he has to accept that an all-inclusive transitional government in Oromia is the only way out, and then and only then would negotiations and talks bear positive results. Otherwise, the fighting is going to continue in Oromia, and the same is going to continue in Amhara and in Tigray, for the reasons that I stated. Of course, people would go to great lengths to avoid any possibility of war because of the situation that they are in, but it doesn't mean that anybody in Tigray is happy about the current arrangement of things. And I think the people who are pretending to help Ethiopia turn a page, the US government and the other allies should really understand this, and that would be the call that I would make on them. Not that they would listen to me, but that would be what I would tell them, that Abiy is not a good faith actor as things stand, and use your leverage to make him accept some painful things, and from there will positive things emerge. And that is that for today. Thank you for the listen, and bye bye.